Hello, this is going to be part 22 of our tutorial for making a game with no experience. I'm actually recording this the same day as the last one, which if you recall, last time I said I was recording it the day after the previous one. I'm doing them all in a flurry. And after I did the last one, I was thinking about what we should do next, and there's some important stuff we should do next, and I chose not to do that. I just had this idea of like, the game has looked the same for a long time, and now that we've got lots of swarmers, that kind of gives it a bit of a different, visual feel. But that background is so horrible. Let's load it up. And the level generation we just did is so awful. And I mentioned I wanted to have like splats when things die, and all that feels like part and parcel of the same thing. Like improving all those things. Seems like one episode, so that's what this is going to be. It's going to be kind of visual stuff and making things prettier and more satisfying. So, the first thing, like this background, let's just destroy this background. So it looks like this right now. Those dots, I don't know, they're meant to be like particles in water, like in the early stage of Spore, but if we just use a maximum tolerance fill, we can change it to be plain grey. Might even make it a bit darker. And then what I wanted to do to it was tint it. I wanted to have like a series of something we've been doing in heat signature recently. We've been generating the galaxy, and our artist John Roberts does these brilliant sprites of nebulae, like fluffy clouds. And in code, I use GameMaker to colour them, and then I layer different ones on top of each other, different rotations and stuff, and the colours meld in really interesting and cool ways. And you can pick totally random colours and mix them, and they look great. And if you pick two colours, almost all combinations look awesome. If you pick three colours, almost all combinations look utter shit. So I'm going to make a tint sprite, and then we're going to spawn them all over the level when the level starts. Every time the level is generated, so we'll make new ones each time. So every time we regenerate the level, you get a different look to it. And we're going to colour them randomly from one of two different colours. We'll pick two different ones and then decide randomly, and we'll then load them on top of each other. So it won't look like a bunch of sprites. It'll look like just the background has this weird undulating maybe effect, or just glowing different colours in different areas. So let's create a new sprite. Since a lot of this stuff is visual, I did a practice run of all this, and the sprites that I drew there, I just want to reuse them. I don't want to draw them again. You don't learn anything watching me do art. This isn't an art tutorial. I can't teach you anything about that. I'll explain roughly how I did the different sprites. But this is a tint sprite, and you can barely see it, right? If it comes out in the video, you might be able to tell that the grid is slightly lighter in the middle. That checkerboard thing just means transparent. All that checkerboard stuff won't be seen. So this is just a very faint white tint, and it's white. That's the important thing. The way I did it was I used the spray tool and did a very low hardness spray in the middle of a image, and that's tiny, and then I blew it up to a large scale, and then I blurred it. So we're going to call it S-tint, and the reason it's white is that when you tint something in GameMaker, what we're going to do, actually I'll explain it as we go. So we're going to make a new object. We're going to call it O-tint, and we're going to give it the tint sprite, and when it's created, we won't actually do it in the create event, but I'll show you what we'll do. We'll do something like image blend equals and then a colour, and one of the standard colours is red. You see red, and if you type that, then everything that is white in the sprite becomes pure red. So the way colours work on a computer is they're made out of red, green and blue components, and white is all of the red, all of the green, all of the blue, all put together. All of the lights are on. That's why it comes out as pure white. And so when you say tint it with red, what it actually does is turn off the blue and the green. And if you said tint it with sort of sky blue, then it would turn off most of the red and most of the green, but leave on the blue. The reason I'm explaining this is that basically the upshot is that things get darker. Anything that's pure white becomes exactly the colour you specify. Anything that's not completely pure white, if it's any darker than that, it becomes a darker version of that colour. So if we had a gradient from black to white, we would see it go from black to red, and all of the gradients in between would just be darker reds. So we're not actually going to do that just yet, but that's the property we will change is called image blend, and it's great for dynamically colouring things and dynamically colouring things is good for making things different each time. So we're going to have no code at all in the tint sprite, because what we care about is actually the creation code of this room, which generates the room. And I'm a little bit bored of having to load up the room to get to this code, because it's in the creation code. So what I'm going to do is type generate level, and we'll make this a script. I'm going to copy all of this, then I'm going to delete. Let's close this window for now. Delete all the actual code, because I've copied it. Then create a new script. Paste it in there. It's called generate level. So that is now called at the start of our level. And after we place the blocks, after we place the boomers, we're going to do a very similar kind of thing. Probably copy the boomer code. And we'll say number of tints. How many do we want? 30 lots. They're very, very faint, so they're going to stack up. And the fact that they're random is going to give interesting combinations, hopefully. Attempts, we don't need to worry about at all, because we're not going to ever delete one of these things. No matter where we place them, it's automatically a valid position. They'll just go under the blocks, they won't go over them, because we'll set up the depth that way. I haven't done that yet, but we will. So we're going to say new tint equals a new instance of the OTint object. And now we're not going to do anything with it in that sense, but we're going to say something like new tint image blend equals color 1, or rather, oh yeah, let's just do choose, sorry. Choose color 1, color 2. This is slightly different to how I did it in the practice run, so I'd be curious to see if it actually looks any good. And we don't need to increase the attempts, we're just going to do it by how the instance number of OTint. Got to remember to change that. How many tints are there? Are there less than the number of tints we want? If so, create one. And it'll keep creating them until they're not less. So, what are colour 1 and colour 2? We need to define those. So we're going to set them up. And we could do... Oh my god. Oh god, typing is so hard. Colour 1 equals see red. But obviously we want it to be different each time, so we want it to be random. So we're going to make colour. Come up with that as make colour RGB. And then in brackets we've got to give it 3 values, the red, the green and the blue. That's what RGB stand for. And if you want truly random colour, then you just type random. All of these are going to be out of 255. Don't ask why. So random number between 0 and 255. And then we'll make colour 2 the same way. And remember, this is done when the level is generated. So when the level is generated, we pick 2 colours then, and they'll be consistent for all of this level. And we'll create tints in random spots. They will look like I just said they'll look, and they'll all be different colours. That might be all we need. Let's see if that works. Yeah, look at that. Now if I go to a new game, oh look at that, that's great. Oh, that's fantastic. So because they're so blurry, you don't notice that they're individual sprites. God, this one's gorgeous. You wouldn't think that was only 2 colours, would you? Must be like... I don't actually know how that's happening. The enemies are going behind the tint, so the obstacles are going in front of it correctly, but the enemies are going behind sometimes, not always. I guess they all have the same depth. Man, this is great, look at all the different levels we've got. Now that's random level generation. So, that's brilliant. But let's change the depth. What's the depth of, like, a swarmer? Stupidly we did depths in the create event, so we said depth 10 there. I'm actually going to delete that out of the code and just write it in here, because there's a depth box for each individual thing. That makes it slightly easier for us to check later reference. So that's depth 10, which means it's 10 layers behind the sort of default. So we want tints to be at least 10 depth. Let's say, I can't imagine anything wanting to be behind the tint. So let's say like 100, just to give us some space to work with. So, now that we've done those, I also want these blocks to look a bit better. How big are they at the moment? Oh, they are 128. That's the size we want. Actually, you know what? Let's do. Before I make them look better, let's do the kind of code side of it, which is I don't like the way that I'll demonstrate what I'm talking about. The way that they kind of overlap with each other and create very irregular patterns. I thought it would be good. I thought, like, usually my attitude with random stuff is like, don't restrict it until you know what the problem is. So them overlapping, I couldn't see why that would be a problem. They might look weird, and it does look weird, and we want to change it. Oh wow, look at that. It's almost no colour. Oh, I love these colours so much, it's so good. Isn't that amazing? That's one sprite that hardly, it's just white, it's almost invisible, and just in code we've created these awesome different colour combinations where every time I generate it I'm like, wow, I haven't seen that one before. Right, we are going to place the blocks in a more regular fashion. So we're going to our generate level script, and we already, let's actually, we'll call this block, yeah, let's just change the word, I don't know, block size equals 128. When I did that last time with the safety margin, when I set it to 128, I said really we should be measuring the size of the block, and that's still true, but we're still not going to do it. But let's just set it in one place. The size of the block is going to be important in lots of different things we're about to do. So we'll store it as a variable. The safety margin should be the size of the block, i.e. we don't want a block to be close enough to the edge that it might overlap with the edge of the room, and then things that are trying to come in from the edge can't get in. So it leaves a nice healthy margin of 64 pixels. Because the width of the block is 128 and its center point is 64 pixels from the edge of it, so if you make it sure it's 128 pixels from the left, there'll be at least 64 free pixels, just to explain. And now we want to make sure, we want to kind of, basically I want to round their x and y positions to the nearest 128 pixels. So after we've created it, we'll still pick the location in a truly random way, I don't have to rewrite all that code. But then we'll say something like x equals, so if x will be a number that might have a decimal point, so when it picks x, if it's trying to pick a number between 0 and 1024, it probably won't pick like 500, it's going to pick 500.369 or something. It's not necessarily a round value. If we wanted to round it to the nearest value, we would say x equals round x. That says that says round it to the nearest whole number. We don't want to round it to the nearest whole number, we want to round it to the nearest 128. And more specifically, we want to do, if we say x div block size, that means it divides x by block size and it ignores any remainder. So if x was 150, this would divide it by 128, which would be 1 point something, and then it will say, well, forget the point something, it's just 1. And that's not what we want. We don't want to shrink everything up into the top left-hand corner where like x is always going to be 4 and or 5 rather than 512. We do want to like reduce the. We want to round them in this way, but then we want to scale them back up to be whole multiples of 128. So ultimately, if you want something to be a whole multiple of 128, you're going to have to have something times 128. And block size is 128. So that is what it's going to look like. That says divide it by 128, forget the remainder, then multiply it by 128. And the result will always be a multiple of 128. It'll be either 128, it'll be 256, it'll be whatever the one in 384 is it, between that and 512. And we're going to do the same for y. This is probably the most obvious thing in the world, but if you're wondering why it's 128, rather than like 100 or 150, that's just because computers like powers of 2. And it doesn't make any actual difference, you could choose whatever value you like, but that's why programmers often pick 64, 128, 512, 256. So this should put them on a grid. Let's just check that it does. And as far as I can tell, this will still obey the edge restrictions. I can't see it clearly enough. Oh wow, that totally didn't work. Why didn't that work? Oh, we didn't, sorry, I didn't do like with, did I? I'm going to move generate level to the top of the scripts. You can drag these things so I don't keep losing it. This was meant to be inside the with thing, obviously. It's the new blocks x we want to change. If we just say x by default, I should have crashed really, because we were referring to the room's x, which surely it doesn't have one. Oh, it doesn't have block size. Okay, yeah. Alright, so this is one reason why we could have just left it as the number 128. So the problem is when we say with new block, and then we refer to block size, block doesn't have a block size. It doesn't know what block size is. We define that here. So I'm just going to change it to be global block size. We'll use that same trick later on with... will we? No, maybe we won't. Oh yeah, but we're going to colour the blocks as well, so we'll use that same trick for that. We could equally take it out of the with statement and then say new block.x equals new block.x div block size. Oh yeah, maybe we're going to do that. I think that's actually going to be easier. So we'll say that place meeting thing, that has to be within the with thing. It's going to be too complicated to do that otherwise. But we'll just say new block.x and then new block.x. So we're going to move it, and then we're going to check it whether it collides with things. So yeah, when you refer to variables, you've got to bear in mind that... Oh, for fuck's sake. Why? I did define that. Oh, it was referring... Oh my god, okay. It's because I did half of one solution and I didn't totally undo all the others. Okay. A global variable is different to a local variable, and if you've made one global, then all references to its former local self will break. Alright, so now they're on a grid. And if we keep respawning them, you should find they're always on a grid. You should also find they don't ever go towards the edge of the room. Man, levels are great. Maybe we don't need to change the appearance of the blocks. I'm going to do it anyway because I did it in the practice run. One fun thing about this is that now we're... How is that only 2 colours? Anyway, one fun thing about this is obviously when colours combine they can create new combinations. I've forgotten what the fun thing about this is. Oh yeah, you could get trapped, right? When it spawns these, it doesn't know that it's not blocking you in, so you've got 3 in an arrangement like that. If you had a 4th one there, and the player was there, you would be trapped. I don't have a neat way of preventing that. I think the best thing we could do probably is make... Oh, I'm really in 2 minds as to whether to replace the solid sprite. Because I did one that I liked the look of, but I think I did it before I tested it with the cool background colours and the grid pattern. Fuck it, we're going to leave it as it is. There's no point in complicating this any further than we need to. If at the end of this I change my mind, then I'll change my mind. So, we've made cool colours, we've got things on a grid. Next thing to do is I want to do these splats. So again, I'm going to import a sprite I made earlier. I just did this with the spray paint thing. I just picked the colour of the... I actually duplicated the exploding enemy sprite and then used the spray gun to like make it splat out. So this is a splat that will be created when the enemy is killed. It's important that the back splatter is going right, because we are going to position the sprite when a bullet hits the swarmer. The swarmer is going to say create a splat and point it in the direction that the bullet was travelling, and if a bullet's travelling directly to the right, then we want the splat to go rightwards as well. So we'll call this swarmer splat, and a splat is going to be a lot like a tint. In fact, maybe we'll even duplicate it. Now we'll create a whole new one. Set a new object. Swarmer splat. Give it that sprite. Give it a depth of... now this should be more than the tint, but less than the... Sorry, less than the tint, but more than the swarmer. What is the swarmer? 10. We'll make this like 50. So swarm splat, again, is going to have no code. It won't do anything. It's just a thing that lies on the ground. And when a swarmer dies, I'm going to change the icon for the swarmer to be its red self, just so it's more obvious where it is in that hierarchy. I keep missing it. So I'll put the swarmer splats and chunks all together. Doesn't matter that I've changed the sprite because the code itself determines what sprite it uses, as we can see here. When they die, we want them to Now, this is actually a little bit tricky because we want to find out the property of the projectile that hit us. We want to find out what its direction was. What direction was it travelling when it hit us? Because we want the splat to go in that direction. If it doesn't go in that direction, it looks really weird. But our hit by projectile script finds a projectile, then destroys it, and then it just tells us true. Yeah, you were hit by something. It doesn't tell us what we were hit by, and even if it did, we couldn't do anything with it because it's already been destroyed. So this script is going to we're going to need a different version of this. So I'm going to duplicate hit by projectile, and we'll call it maybe just projectile that hit us. Projectile that hit us. And now, go away. I minimized it away. So instead of saying if hit by projectile, we're going to say well, actually, let's edit the script first. So it's going to find this thing, and honestly, this isn't doing anything. Let's not even make this a script. Sorry, we're abandoning this. It's not worth making a script. We'll delete it. If we end up writing enough code here that it makes sense to make it a script, then maybe we will. But basically, we're doing the old thing of create a variable to store what hit us, and if it exists, if instance exists, incoming projectile, then by all means shake the screen, but don't explode into a number of chunks yet, because we want to do my splat equals instance create xy swarmer splat, and then my splat dot image angle equals incoming projectile image angle. So match the angle of the thing that hit us. And then you know, I am going to write a script, but just for one very specific thing, and it's going to be, so the code that I want to avoid writing out again is the code that's in this hit by projectile script that says if the projectile that hit us was a player chunk, don't destroy it. If it was anything else, do destroy it. And that's the kind of very specific special case exception that you don't want to be duplicating all over your code, because as soon as you change your mind about that and you say, actually there's this one other kind of projectile, like if we make a penetrating bullet, then that bullet shouldn't be destroyed either. And now we've got all these different references where only the player chunk is the exception to the idea that a projectile gets destroyed when it hits something. So I don't like the idea of copying and pasting that. I want to make it a function. So we're going to say something like stop projectiles, I think. I want to say like stop stoppable projectiles. Maybe just, yeah, let's say stop projectile. Maybe we'll call it like projectile collision, because it's not strictly true if we say stop projectile, because it's not going to stop it if it's a player chunk. It's going to go right through us. Maybe like projectile hit something, incoming projectile, and then this business about checking for the exception, that is what we're going to put in our script. So the script will be called projectile hit something, and we won't use this word incoming projectile. We'll say like this projectile equals argument 0. That's whatever you passed us, whatever you told us to look at, we'll store it as this projectile, and then we'll check against that. So if this projectile object index is not equal to player chunk, then we destroy it. And later on we can edit that if we need to, and it will be consistent over all the different places that we do that. So we're not even using hit by projectile script, but here we're going to say projectile hit something, incoming projectile. So that may destroy it or may not, depending on what kind of projectile it is. And then we're going to explode it into chunks, which is good. It's always nice. Ages ago I made the swarmer chunk small. I made it half scale. I think I'm just going to delete that. I think I'll just leave it at full scale. It they're too small at the moment, they're too subtle, you don't notice them. So hopefully it's going to create splats when you destroy a swarm. Shouldn't be hard to test. Yep, there they are. I wonder if they're too big. So this changes a lot about the game. But for one thing, it's really satisfying. And the way that it makes it a couple of like mini splats on around the main splat, and the fact that projectiles also come out, like fragments come out of the thing that you killed. That kind of, those two effects kind of combine in an interesting way that makes it feel like I've programmed these little splats to come out and then settle on the ground. I haven't. No such thing happens. But you can see how quickly the battlefield becomes a hideous mess. Whoa! And chain reactions become a lot more satisfying now. Look at this. Oh, he's stuck. Wow, I died and that killed something else. I actually want to kill all the green things because, wow, they get really big. Why do they get so big? Okay, that should be all of them. So now we can just mow down everything. Paint the room red. It sort of looks gory, even though it's not. I mean, it kind of is blood, but it's like, the reason it's red is just because our enemy's red. It's not human blood. He protests slightly too hastily. It looks really good with this room background colour too. I think they're still spawning, aren't they? No. I think we just spawned a fuck of a lot of them. I don't know why I want to complete this level. Oh yeah, I do know why actually. I want to show what it looks like when you finish a level and all of this horrific mess goes back to being clean again. Get a new fresh room. This cleanup phase this is probably the longest cleanup phase I've ever had. Fire is eliminated! And so next level is all clean again. Actually a rather plain looking room as well. So yeah, that's way more satisfying right away. It feels like how the level... That gets so big, why did it get so big? That's really strange. Anyway, we get that. So that's great. Now, something I realised recently was that the boomers don't explode into fragments. I sort of took a shortcut there and I said, we'll just have the things inside it explode into fragments, and those fragments will be special case fragments that actually hurt things. That's a really weird idea. Let's not do that. So right now, I'm actually going to take that code out, because it's just a strange thing. So, how do we do it? Oh, we actually do it on the swarmer itself, doesn't it? If the swarmer dies, it checks. Have we been eaten by something? And why? Okay, yeah, I just did this now. Oh yeah, okay, it's up here. There it says that. And having those two kinds of chunks is a bit strange. Do I care? I kind of care. But then the problem is if we take this out, we've got to have something there. So we've got to just copy and paste that. I guess we can do that. Yeah, we'll just die in the normal way. There's like a more elegant way to do that that doesn't mean repeating that line, but I don't really care. So you don't have to change that if you don't want to, but we're going to make boomers explode into chunks, and that's going to be a big deal, and that's going to be the thing. The boomer chunks are going to be what actually hurts the other enemies. And that appeals to me more in a design way, because then we have a consistent rule that the red chunks don't hurt anyone, they're immaterial and they're small and inconsequential, and the green chunks are going to be this big deal, and player chunks are a big deal as well. So let's duplicate the exploding enemy chunk sprite, and edit it. I'm going to stretch it, I want it to be bigger, and in particular I want it to be much longer, so let's at least double the length. I'm not going to keep the aspect ratio, and maybe that'll be action. Now let's do like 150 height and 250 length. Yeah, well, that's good. And then we want it to be green, so we're going to colorize. I like to check shift hue here, because it means if there's any variation in the hue within the sprite, it kind of gets preserved to some extent. What's the colour of our green guy? Probably that, right? And we call it Espuma chunk. I'm going to place the origin just sort of roughly in the tail bit. It doesn't matter too much. And so when a boomer dies, right now it just says instant destroy, which is rather sad. Explode into a number of chunks, and number of chunks, 25 or something, and chunk type, boomer chunk, which we haven't created yet. And we get rid of instance destroy because this function itself destroyed us. So I forgot, I've made the sprite but I haven't made the chunk yet. So exploding enemy chunk, we're going to duplicate that and call it boomer chunk and select the right sprite. And the reason we duplicated the exploding enemy chunk is that's the one that hurts things. It's a child of the projectile. It sounds like a John Woo film. And it's got all this stuff in it about how it will decelerate and all that kind of thing. So hopefully if we press space here that will register. Yeah. So that's fine, but I actually want it to... The number of chunks we emit should be more if we've eaten a lot. So 25 if we just destroy, if you've eaten like one other enemy, and if you eat more than one, we'll just multiply 25 by that. So that's a lot. If you've eaten 5 things, that's going to be 125 shards. So let's see how that looks. Oh my god. Ah! Click outside the window, all the controls break completely. Whoa, yeah, that looks good. They're nice and big, you can't miss them. Do they kill things? Yeah, they kill things. They really kill things. Okay, so let's get loads and loads and loads of things. Fucking hell, there we go. That's what I'm talking about. Now, obviously we want the boomer to make a splat. But something I did it, there's 2 different ways, and in my practice run, and then in the end I decided that the second way was cool and the first way wasn't really needed. So instead of making the boomer make a splat, we will create a splat for the boomers. Just duplicate the swarmer splat and edit the sprite, colorize. Oh look, saved our settings from last time, so we'll get the exact same hue offset. And call that S-boomer splat. But instead of the boomer himself turning into the splat, I think all these fragments should turn into the splat. So those boomer chunks, go into their step code and see what they do. They decelerate, and when they stop, they shrink over time. Yeah, they just shrink all the time anyway, actually. And then once they run out of size, they destroy themselves. Let's say you don't shrink and don't destroy yourself, and when you stop, instead, make a my splat equals instance create xyo boomer splat. Did I not create that? No, I guess I didn't create that. Let's duplicate the swarmer splat. Let's give it the boomer splat thing and call it splat. Yeah. So it's going to create one, and then the reason we've stored it as a variable is we want to say mySplat.imageAngle equals our image angle. And now, to be honest, the speed equals 0 thing doesn't matter because we're also going to destroy ourselves. So we're going to create a splat, have it face the same way we're facing, and destroy ourselves. So the shard becomes a splat. Let's see how that looks. I don't know why I instinctively shoot those green guys just automatically. There we go! That's great. They get big way too fast. Oh, yes! That's fucking awesome. And that's probably all of them. So those shards, it's creating a lot more of them. They're big, they're deadly, and they leave a mark on the battlefield as well. Which is great. In my tests I managed to make it so that in some cases they would create so many shards that it actually slowed the game down, and perversely that felt really good. So let me see if I can make that happen. Let's get this guy and just keep feeding him. Oh my god! I failed in my experiment. Okay, let's get maybe this guy and keep feeding him. Fucking hell. I'm not very good at avoiding enemies, that's fine. Cool. Let's just put loads and loads of bait on loads and loads of enemies and make loads and loads of guys big and just see how that works. It's funny, you can get into a situation where the green guy's hogging all your bait because he's attracted to it, and so he keeps coming towards where you're firing. There we go! Oh god, that's amazing. I don't care that it slows down if you do it. We can put a limit on that if you like, but do you want to be that person? Do you really want to put a limit on how many chunks of green goo come out of the thing when you've fed it up and made it explode? I just think that the fact that that slows down your computer is at worst no problem, and at best actually a positive. The fact that they grow to massive size after eating just one is really weird, and then you change that. Fucking hell. Okay, that's awesome. I love that. So let's do some work on that boomer thing of them growing. So something I've wondered about for a while is that the rate at which they grow is massively significant when they're at... If you're at 0.5 scale and you add 0.35 to that, that nearly doubles your size. And if you're at 1.5 scale and you add 0.35 to that, that's tiny. So it makes very little difference. Which is what you'd want, isn't it? Why does it seem so rubbish? Anyway, we're going to do... There's something strange about that. I don't know why it looks the way it currently looks. But in my practice run, what I did was divide the growth rate by things eaten. And we know that you've got to be careful when you divide that it's never going to be 0, but we know it's not going to be 0 because things eaten is increased by 1 right before we do this. Maximum size, there's something very strange going on here. Because they get huge, and the maximum size is 2. How do they get so big? Anyway, we're going to do this. We're going to do maximum size 5, and then we'll just test it and see how that looks. Oh no, one more thing, sorry. I've also seen a problem where sometimes the battlefield gets so doused in virus juice that you can't see those semi-transparent green guys, particularly if they haven't eaten anything, because they've got nothing solid inside them. So I'm just going to say, somewhere down here, if things eaten equals 0, actually no, sorry, let's make them solid by default, so when they start, when they haven't eaten anything, their image alpha is going to be 1, we're not going to reduce it. Leave it at that. And then in our code, when we eat something, we'll change the image alpha to 0.4, let's say. So it doesn't scale smoothly or anything, it's just if they've never eaten anything, they're nice and bright so we can see them. If they have eaten something, they're very transparent, but by that point we probably know where they are. So yeah, they're immediately clearer. And when they eat something, hopefully... Okay, so that's... The guy's eaten 1, he goes that big. That seems about right. He's eaten 2, he goes that big. Yeah, that seems about right. Let's keep feeding these guys up. Yeah, for whatever reason this new maths works well and the older maths doesn't. There we go! It's so much more satisfying now. There's actually one more thing I want to do. I don't like... So in general, we just made a decision early on about like when things explode into chunks, including the player, those chunks just go straight through stuff. They don't get blocked by solids. And that's definitely good for the red guys, because there's loads of those explosions happening all the time. We don't care where the red shards go at all. It has no consequence. But for the green shards, we make such a big deal of them. If they kill things, they make a huge mark on the battlefield. And they look great. Reform me in the block. I was hoping you wouldn't do that. Okay, kick can get you out there. Those shards are so significant that I think they should bounce off walls. And we're gonna add that code to them. This is the deceleration stuff. Before we decelerate, we will add this code. So I've written it ahead of time, and I'll explain it. I don't want to go through and write it all again, because I've actually explained this one chunk of code twice already in this series, or things like it, because I think it was part of the episode that I had to do a recap on because I went too fast. So I'm putting spaces in everything because I like it that way. This says if we're about to hit something, when we add our speed to our coordinates, we're going to hit a solid, then are we hitting something horizontally? If so, bounce horizontally. Reverse our horizontal velocity without necessarily reversing our vertical velocity. And then, are we hitting something vertically? And if so, bounce vertically. And if we're not if our horizontal speed alone is not enough to make us hit something, and our vertical speed alone is not enough to make us hit something, this does nothing. I think previously we did something in that case, but we don't care enough. These are just shards, they're bouncing around. If one of them gets stuck somewhere, it doesn't matter because it's going to turn into a splat any second. But the main thing is if it hits a wall, it should bounce off that wall. And let's make sure it can hit either kind of wall, and it'll bounce off them. And it could, in theory, do both in the same turn. In the same step. They're like turns. All games are actually turn-based. So yeah, let's fatten up one of these guys. And I kind of want to kill him near some walls. Actually, in that corridor would be perfect, wouldn't it? I can bait him down there. Yes! Look at that! What a perfect demonstration. And I think that's way more satisfying, isn't it? Like, the fact that they splurge off walls really feels good. So that might be everything, is it? I think it's... Oh, that looks so good. I think that might be all the changes we made. I think... Did I make a list? Let's check the list. Tints, splats, shards on boomers, boomers not transparent until eaten, boomer shards bounce, blocks on grid, block look. So yeah, should we... I quite like those blocks. But I'll just show you what I did. I sort of tried to make a block that just looked in any way different to that. I'm going to back up my solid black block, because we wouldn't want to lose valuable work like that. And I made them look like this. Oh yeah, and the complication with this is that it's grey, and actually we don't want it to be grey. We want to, when we generate the level, and we create all these blocks, that's where we create all the solids, we're going to do something like global block color equals, and again we're just going to use that code to make a random color, and then every time we create a block we'll say new block.image blend equals this block color. Now we don't need to make it look global, do we? Forget about global. I can't remember if I ever explained about... I think I did explain about globals, didn't I? Yeah, the number of chunks the player is made of is a global variable. We talked about that. But we don't need to do it here because we're going to do it that same way we did the x and y coordinates. So yeah, now the blocks will be tinted. Let's see if this does look better. I can't make up my mind. There's something quite nice about black silhouettes. They're quite neat. And this is shitty art, so that counts against it. Yeah, I think I like this actually, because they have their own colour, and there's something quite... They are absolutely breakout bricks, there's no getting away from it. They're the most my first game thing ever, but yeah, I like them, they give it a bit of colour to it. So that is it, that is our visual overhaul done. You'll notice it didn't take very long, because this is not an art heavy game, and all the value we got out of it, all the impressive stuff, all the stuff I enjoy about it anyway, comes from just being able to be ridiculous. Like, we can make something explode into over 1,000 pieces, and every one of those pieces bounce dynamically off obstacles, because we are making the simplest goddamn game. Like, what's going on under the hood in this compared to GTA 5 is so laughably pathetic, but we can just ramp the scale of everything up to absurd degrees. I mean, GTA also can ramp that up to absurd degrees, but then you need a good computer. And if you've seen like the GTA 5 mod where you can fire cars out, all those cars individually explode, the amount of work those guys have to do to make a car explode on the processor side and the GPU side and things is so much more than we have to do. So our advantage is that we can make things of ridiculous scale, and we just don't have to worry about performance and optimization. And even when it does slow down, in this context, it's kind of cool, sort of like a slow-mo effect. And of these splats, by the way, like in our game as it stands, we can create an infinite number of them, which surely will break at some point. I've never seen it happen, but we could impose a limit. Obviously, we could either say like, oh, if there's too many, don't create a new one. It's interesting that they get stuck in walls. I wonder if we've messed up their collision grid. Or the other way to do it would be, I like the idea that every time a splat, you give each splat like 100 life, and then every time a splat is created, it reduces the life of all splats in the world by 1, so that they don't have a time limit, but the more of them you make, the closer the old ones get to fading. So that ensures that there's only never more than 100, but also makes it so that it's always the oldest one that fades. Because you kind of don't want, if you get into a situation where the new ones can't be created, then the player will notice that, because they'll see new splats aren't getting created. Whereas if the old ones fade away, you don't notice that so much. So we could do that. I don't care enough. It's never been a problem. You'd have to sit here all day mowing down these guys for that to be a problem, I think. Might vary, of course. You'll all be doing this on different computers. This is a a MacBook Air with a decent processor and some RAM. It's not the sort of mega powered thing, but it's decent enough to play certain games. Most 3D games don't run well on this. That's so much more satisfying. It's a little bit hard to see the red guys on the red splats, which is a foreseeable readability problem. I did try making the red splats darker to alleviate that, but I made them darker than I liked, and it still didn't make the difference enough. I think the way to solve that would actually be to, on the sprite for the Swarmer, create a little dark shadow around him, and that's an art problem. If this were any of my other games, John Roberts would sort that out for me. But yeah, we don't need to think about that too much. I'm talking about it because it's worth, as a designer, you should be worrying about readability and you should be thinking about it and thinking about solutions for it. But in terms of this tutorial, I don't want to teach you how to put a shadow on something, because that's just not the kind of tutorial this is. I don't know any more about that than you do. Oh, those are enemies. I was wondering why those blue things haven't disappeared. They are getting stuck in blocks a lot more. I wonder why that is. Well, it still hasn't made an impossible level. In fact, when we make these levels, I've still never seen it trap you, and that's actually surprising. I would have thought it would happen a lot more than it does. It seems to be incredibly unlikely that it will ever trap you. Okay, but that's it. We've done our visual overhaul. I think next time we'll really make a tutorial, because that's pretty important, and see where we go from there.